To curb the spread of contagious diseases, South Africa will soon be implementing new import regulations for livestock. The new regulations, to be imposed on Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho and Swaziland, will place a huge burden on our economy. The new regulations demand that whole cattle herds have to be tested for tuberculosis and lung sickness. They need to be quarantined, vaccinated and tagged before leaving Namibia. All exercises that will cost farmers money in a time where they are facing drought and severe water shortages. Farming representatives met with President Hage Geingob this month to urge government intervention. As the Namibian authorities request further engagements with the South African authorities, or at the very least a delay in this new legislation, Namibia's $2 billion industry remains on edge. We speak to Mr. Sackie Coetzee, the Executive Manager of the Namibian Agricultural Union, to find out more about the future of livestock exports to South Africa under these stringent new laws. Good evening, viewers, and welcome to One Exclusive. With us in studio this evening is Mr. Sackie Coetzee from the Namibian Agricultural Union. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Now, sir, just to give our viewers an idea, could you tell us what type of livestock are we exporting at the moment?
Yes, I think we must look into the history of Namibian export. For the last 60, 70, 80 years, South Africa was and still is a very important trading partner for Namibia and especially for Namibian livestock. Livestock, we talk about livestock on the hoof, live animals. We annually export about, say, 180 to 200,000 weaners to the feedlots in South Africa. And then we export about 90,000 sheep and about 240 to 250,000 goats has been exported to South Africa. Now, for the goats, that is actually our only market. We know that locally there is no slaughter market for goats, so that is our only market. For the sheep, yes, we know about the growth at home policies of the government. We know that there is a restriction on the export of live sheep, and that you can slaughter it locally. You have to slaughter it locally. You can build up a quota, and then you can export one sheep for one that you slaughter locally. But still, the prices fetched in South Africa for those sheep are much better in most cases than in Namibia.
Herds need to be tested, treated, vaccinated and tagged against a number of diseases. These exercises cost time, human resources and money, which begs the question, are these costly procedures really necessary? Due to its popularity, a lot of meat is exported to the European Union, which has stringent import regulations already, and Namibia has a solid international reputation for healthy livestock. Should our animal health status be re-evaluated at such a cost? We continue our conversation with Executive Manager of Namibian Agricultural Union, Sackie Coetzee.
It's very difficult in terms of the management of grazing. Traditionally, as I said, South Africa is a trading partner, and the feedlots are the people who buy the livestock. I think with the meat and our processed meat being exported to mainly Europe and then Norway now, there is a market for our processed meat. Yes, there is. But unfortunately, we produce more that can be raised locally. And for that, we have to have an outlet. It's especially important in years of drought. You know that for the last 3-4 years, you have to get rid of whatever your cattle you can or livestock that you can get rid of to survive the drought. And in most cases, it is the weaners, it is the goats, it is the surplus sheep that you have to get rid of. And South Africa, as I said, is traditionally the market for that.
Now, South Africa's exports have been going up, but I think we've reached an all-time low for exports to South Africa. I think it's declined by 77% over the last 3 years. So the question really is South Africa making money off of our meat, off of our livestock, Would we put it in that context?
Namibia is a net exporter of meat. We produce more than we can eat. South Africa is a net importer of meat. They produce less than they need to eat. Although they've got now a market where they can export certain cuts, in total, they need to import to feed their people. So you have to also see that against that background. Yes, obviously, when you raise cattle, from weaner up to slaughterable, you get more, you add value, and you get more money for that. Unfortunately, that money is now in the pockets of the South Africans, and especially in the feedlots. But on the other hand, it is a market for us, and our people, some of our people, especially the weaner producers, they do not have the facilities to raise those weaners up to slaughterable weights so that it can be slaughtered.
Now, just to get back to the crux of the matter, we're here to discuss South Africa's new state handling procedures. Now, these procedures have been in the pipeline for the last 2 years, but now there's this sudden fear. What's triggering this implementation? Has there been, more infectious diseases in our countries, or what is this crux of the matter?
No, not at all. South Africa, the animal health status. We claim that the animal health status of Namibia is equal or even better than the animal health status of South Africa. Why? Because we have to adhere to those animal health status to export our products to Europe and Norway. What happened in South Africa is that they gained international status about 2-3 years ago. We know that they are subject to foot-and-mouth disease. We know that, for example, buffalo is free roaming in South Africa, which is not allowed in Namibia. Buffalo is a carrier of foot-and-mouth disease. So there's a lot of things in South Africa which they did to increase their animal health status up to the standard where they were allowed to export there also to the international world. I think what they do is to protect that animal health status. And I think that is the main reason why they introduce now these stringent requirements. Especially from Namibia, we claim that our animal health status does not justify that requirements. It might be that animals from Zimbabwe, we know that the border between South Africa and Zimbabwe is not what it should be. Also between Lesotho, Swaziland and South Africa, there is free roaming. There is not the control that we've got in Namibia. So to put us in the same pocket in the same box than those countries, I think is unfair. We know, all of us know, that we've got our fan meat system, we've got the traceability, we've got all the requirements that we need to export.
A lot of our heifers have to be vaccinated against most of these diseases before they reach 9 months.
Yeah.
So, yes, so are these regulations really necessary?
From our side, not for those cattle or sheep that end up in the feedlot or in the abattoir. Probably yes, for those that end up in the herds in South Africa. We understand that if you import a bull or import heifers for breeding purposes, yes, let them be subject to those requirements. But those which has been transported directly to the feedlot and who's been slaughtered after 2 or 3 months or 5-6 months, we don't think that there is any risk for those animals for the South African veterinary status. So no, I don't think it's necessary, but it is now been done, and we have to live with that.
And then also, I mean, it's quite a process, the state handling procedure. You've got to get your animal vaccinated, it's got to be quarantined, and a national identity tagging, I think, is the other thing that I wanted to talk about. I mean, realistically, a remote farmer in the middle of nowhere, is he going to be able to keep up with all these things, with all these procedures?
Well, we learned in terms for the cattle, we've got the double ear tag system, we've got the NAMLET system, we've got the traceability. Yes, I think for the cattle it is not a big issue. I think it has already been sorted out. For the sheep now, to double ear tag them, also with an electronic and a visual ear tag, also put them on the NAMLET system, it will put tremendous pressure on our NAMLET system, on the capacity of the system. And eventually, if you quite rightly look at it, you ear tag it today, it will be, say, a few months on your farm, and then it will be transported and it will be slaughtered. So what is exactly the use of that?
What's the point?
What is the point of that? That is actually a big problem. I foresee for our goats, I foresee a real problem, because these other animals, sheep and cattle, is destined for either a feedlot or abattoir, but for the goat market, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, it's not a destined abattoir where it has been slaughtered. We know that traditionally those people buy live goats and then they go and slaughter it for religious purposes. So I foresee for the goats we're going to have a big problem. Yeah.
Viewers, after the break, we'll talk a little bit more about the new state handling procedures for livestock exported to South Africa. It is difficult for communal farmers to invest in their herds as they do not control the access to their grazing lands. Planning also proves difficult with animal health testing, as our country does not have many veterinarians, and remote farmers will struggle to get all their cattle vaccinated in a timely fashion. With seasonal drought and current water shortages, grazing land is scarce, and farmers are forced to sell their livestock at sharply declining prices. With a drop of almost 40% in income over the last few weeks, the livelihood of our livestock farmers is being put on the line. So what are our options? Can Namibia still afford to place all its eggs in the export basket? Do our farmers have enough resources to grow their weaners to slaughter size? And why are we not investing in local feedlots and abattoirs? Next up, Sackie Coetzee from the Namibian Agricultural Union talks to us about the few solutions Namibian farmers might need to look at to save the livestock industry. Welcome back, viewer. Mr. Coetzee, now just to pick up from where we left off, how many people are actually going to be affected by these new regulations? I mean, it's not just the farmer, is it?
Well, mainly it is the farmers who is going to be affected, but also the auctioneers, the transporters, and all the people down in the value chain will be affected. I think, yeah.
And how is the price being affected, our livestock price being affected at the moment?
Well, I just listened to one of the radio stations, and the weaner prices for tollies dropped to $13 last week. That is down from $18 to $13. That's for live weight. For heifers, it dropped to $12 per kilo live weight, down from $17.
So that's almost a 30% loss in income.
It is even more, 40% loss in income for people depending on especially weaners as a source of income. Yes.
So how is the farmer going to mitigate this? I mean, some say that, you know, we need to start focusing our product locally and we need to start selling it locally. Are farmers going to try and market their livestock locally? Is this going to work at all?
Well, as I said, our local market is very small. We've got a few farmers, yes, who buy weaners and raise them to slaughterable cattle. Yes, they are there, but they cannot absorb the majority of the weaners that has been produced. I think the pressure is now, we know that the profitability of the farming sector is under tremendous pressure. I can show you figures in terms of the cost squeeze, how the costs go up and the prices actually stay stable. We are actually down 10 years with the same income real income is about the same for the last 10 years, while the cost increases by 147% over the last 10 years. So the requirements will now add to the cost of the farmer. It will be the farmer who have to pay for the veterinarian, for the testing of the blood. But apart from that, I think the biggest problem is the grazing, the availability of grazing to keep cattle back and to for 10 weeks to keep them back.
So not only is it a financial cost, but it's also costly time-wise. The fact that now you have to put your entire herd through this process during a time of drought, where first of all you do have water shortages, you have to buy supplementary feed, and you have to hire grazing land if you don't perhaps have enough of that.
If you can get some to hire, you'll be lucky. But at this stage, I think that is probably the biggest problem. We know that for the last three years, the drought had a tremendous influence on the farmers, and now only to keep your core herd alive for the next season, now you have to add the extra livestock on that grazing. You can only depend on the grazing, you have to depend on what you said, extra fodder, leeks, etc., to try to at least keep them at the same weight and to comply with requirements to eventually, hopefully, you can sell it.
Do you think erecting feedlots and more abattoirs, I mean, honestly, we have a water shortage, which makes any, infrastructural development difficult. But do you see that as a long-term solution to get, to take the burden off livestock export?
The question should always be, where are there not feedlots in Namibia? And it's a very, very simple answer. The cost of the fodder is too expensive. It's cheaper to transport a livestock to where the fodder is, for instance, down in Gauteng, to raise it up to slaughterable cattle, to a slaughterable size, and bring it back, and then slaughter it locally, than to feed it or to bring in the feed. Bring in the feed. That is the crux of the matter. People are very, very talk a lot about feedlots. Feedlots is a very, very expensive exercise, and with the lack of fodder in Namibia, it is just not a viable option. You can ask if Meatco, for example, do not integrate the feedlot with its slaughter house as well as with the marketing of those livestock, then it's not a viable option. So feedlot per se is not a viable option. It's too costly.
So we need to look at a holistic answer for farmers in general that will absorb not only, new regulations and those costs, but during times of drought as well, to mitigate these factors.
What I see is a total restructuring of our national herd. For an example, you've got 150 cows and you're a weaner producer. What happens is that as soon as you wean the calves, you sell it, and you can keep the cows and they reproduce again, etc., etc. What might happen now is that you have to reduce your cows, say to 80 or 100, to make room on your farm to keep the offsprings and to keep the weaners and to raise them. But that will take time. That will take at least 2, 3 years, 4 years to restructure your farming operations. Once again, I think for the commercial farmer, it might be easier. For the communal farmer, I foresee a lot of problems due to the reasons that we already discussed. I foresee problems for them to restructure their herds so that they keep less breeding stock and do have room for raising cattle. Yeah.
Now, on a final note, Mr. Coetzee, from the Namibian Agricultural Union, is there any advice or any assistance that you'd like to offer farmers in general, particularly with the new regulations?
Well, hopefully there will be, I trust that there will be still negotiations regarding weaners that goes to the feedlots specifically. And that hopefully South Africa will see that there is no animal health risk for the South African herd for those livestock going to feedlots.
And that's where most of our income really
and that
lies.
is actually, if we can negotiate a release there or a waiver therefore to comply with most of these stringent requirements, then it will be a big relief for Namibia. Otherwise, we still will have to think in restructuring our herds, as I said. But you know, farmers, we will make plans. We will see what we can do. It will be a hurdle initially, and we will struggle to cope with it. But eventually, the other problem, you see, is not only the farmers and the grazing, but it's also the capacity of our laboratories, because they have now to test all these blood samples and then 2 or 3 times and give it back to the farmers. So that is another bottleneck, another capacity problem.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coetzee. For the viewers and the farmers out there, contact us on 555 for your comments and input on to this week's topic.